Imagine a creature designed by the very hand of an unforgiving Arctic winter. Picture a predator with a chest like a wine barrel, muscles anchored to bone with the density of reinforced concrete, and a brain 10% larger than your own. This wasn't a primitive beast. This was the Neanderthal. For 300,000 years, they were the undisputed sovereigns of the European meat grinder. They didn't just survive the Ice Age, they thrived in it, staring down woolly rhinos, wrestling cave lions with little more than grit and sharpened stone. They were stronger than us, tougher than us, and arguably smarter in the ways of the wild. If you were a betting god looking down at the Pleistocene, you wouldn't have put a single cent on the scrawny, narrow-shouldered refugees arriving from Africa. You would have bet on the heavyweights. And yet, look around. The Neanderthal is a ghost, a collection of fragmented DNA in our genomes, and dusty skeletons in museum basements. We are the ones who inherited the Earth. We, the weak ones, watch the masters of the ice vanish into the permafrost. This isn't a story of survival of the fittest in the way you've been taught. It's the story of how a flimsy stick and the ability to talk behind someone's back paved the way for the total domination of Homo sapiens. Because the truth is, we didn't outmuscle the Neanderthal. We cheated. The mystery of the Neanderthal extinction is one of history's most enduring cold cases. For decades, the narrative was simple. We were smart, and they were dim-witted brutes. But modern paleoanthropology has shattered that myth. Neanderthals buried their dead with flowers. They wore jewelry. They possessed the FOXP2 gene, the genetic gateway to complex speech. They were an apex version of humanity, refined over millennia to be the ultimate survival machines. When Homo sapiens finally migrated into Europe around 45,000 years ago, we didn't find a vacant landscape. We found a formidable rival that had already mastered the terrain. So, what went wrong for the Titans? Why did the biological equivalent of a Panzer tank lose out to a species that looked like a stiff breeze could knock it over? To understand our survival, we have to stop looking at muscle and start looking at mechanics. To understand the Neanderthal, you have to understand the sheer physical cost of their existence. Evolution doesn't give you a body like that for free. A single male Neanderthal required upwards of 5,000 calories a day, roughly the intake of an Olympic triathlete, or more than double what you and I eat, just to maintain his bulk in the biting cold. Their skeletal remains tell a brutal story. Almost every adult specimen found shows evidence of healed fractures, particularly around the head and neck. In fact, their injury patterns almost perfectly mirror those of modern rodeo riders. Why? Because they were ambush predators who hunted with thrusting spears. They didn't have the luxury of distance. To kill a bison or a mammoth, a Neanderthal had to get close enough to smell its breath, jamming a heavy stone-tipped shaft directly into the vitals of a multi-ton beast. It was high risk, high reward, raw power and incredible physical courage. Their brains were equally specialized, featuring a massive occipital lobe fine-tuned for high-resolution vision in the dim conditions of the north. They were biological night vision goggles. But specialization is a trap. In the fluctuating climate of the late Pleistocene, weather could shift from tundra to forest in the span of a single century. Being perfectly adapted to one environment isn't an advantage when that environment disappears. It's a death sentence. The Neanderthal was a masterpiece of biological engineering, built for a wrestling match in a world that was about to invent the sniper rifle. Then Homo sapiens didn't bring muscle to that match. We brought the rifle. We arrived on the scene with bodies that were, frankly, pathetic by comparison. Thin bones, meager muscles, zero natural insulation against the frost. But we brought a revolution in physics, the Atlatl. If you've never seen a spear thrower, it looks deceptively simple. A notched stick that acts as an extension of the human arm, creating a mechanical lever. But that simple lever changed the math of the hunt forever. Using an Atlatl, A Sapiens hunter could hurl a dart at speeds over 100 miles per hour, with enough kinetic energy to pierce the thick hide of a mammoth from 30 yards away. Suddenly, the Rodeo-Rider injuries disappeared, at least for us. We didn't need to wrestle the megafauna. We could rain down death from the shadows. This was about safety, but more importantly, it was about caloric efficiency. A Sapiens hunter could miss a shot, retrieve his dart, and try again. A Neanderthal who missed a thrust was often trampled or gored. While Neanderthals were slowly being ground down by the attrition of close-quarters combat, Sapiens traded the raw power of the bicep for the mechanical advantage of the lever. We didn't need to be stronger. We just needed to be further away. But having a sniper rifle isn't enough if you're hunting alone. Our deadliest weapon wasn't made of stone. It was built on an invisible web of trust. When archaeologists dig up Neanderthal sites, they find tools made from stone sourced almost exclusively within a 5-mile radius. Neanderthals were parochial, living in small, isolated groups of 10 to 15. If a local band hit a stretch of bad luck, they simply died out. There was no safety net. Sapiens sites from the exact same period tell a completely different story. We find seashells hundreds of miles from the coast, obsidian from distant volcanoes, and flint from quarries 300 miles away. Sapiens were connected to massive social networks of hundreds, linked by trade, ritual, and complex language. The ability to share stories and talk behind someone's back to establish social rules. We invented the concept of the stranger who is not an enemy. If the game moved south, Sapiens knew because their cousins 50 miles away passed the message. If one group was starving, they relied on a friendly band they had traded with the previous summer. This social broadband allowed for rapid innovation. If a genius in one tribe improved the Atlatl, that idea rippled across the continent. Neanderthals, living in isolated silos, had to reinvent the wheel every few generations. To put it in modern terms, Sapiens were a distributed network. Neanderthals were a series of disconnected servers. We didn't exterminate the Neanderthals in a great prehistoric war. We simply out-organized them. We occupied the best valleys, claimed the best herds, and had 1,000 friends to back us up, while they stood alone in the cold. The extinction of the Neanderthal wasn't a failure of their biology. It was a testament to the terrifying power of abstract thinking. They were the pinnacle of physical evolution, the ultimate inhabitants of a frozen world. But they were individuals in a world that was moving toward the collective. We won because we were weak enough to need each other, and clever enough to kill from a distance. We replaced the solitary titan with the coordinated mob. Looking back at the ruins of their world, we shouldn't feel superior. We should feel a chill. The Neanderthals didn't do anything wrong. They were just playing a game whose rules changed overnight. They had the muscle. They had the brain. They had the heart. But we had the stick, and we had the story. And in the end, the story is what survives. So, do you think Sapiens would still dominate if a physical powerhouse like the Neanderthal re-emerged today? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to explore more stories about how humanity cheated its way to the top of the food chain, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next deep dive.